This is Duke University.
All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am Stacia Solomon. I am one of the advisors in the Duke Career Center. I am joined by two of my esteemed colleagues, Ms. Leanne Waring and Christina Plant, and six of our phenomenal alums who will speak to you this evening for our Exploring Careers, Sustainability, and the Environment, a virtual Duke alumni panel discussion. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into it. Just one bit of housekeeping as you're coming in. Please do make sure that you keep yourself on mute the entire time. If you do have a question that comes up as the alums are speaking this evening, please type that in the chat. We are actively monitoring that. We definitely want to try to address your questions if we can do so. If you came in at the very beginning, then you did get an opportunity to see kind of in a speedy fashion the bios for our alums. That is something that we should be able to share post-event with you so that you could get a closer look at that. But I want to go ahead and give ample room to our alums to begin speaking. We do have six with us this evening. And we will go through and let each of them share something about themselves. Alums, I will call your name as we go through just to create a sense of order before we get into our question portion. So starting with Gregory, if you would, and everyone is going to answer this same prompt, we just want to learn more about you and your career. So could you just tell us a little bit more about your current position, connecting it back to what the impact of your major and your degree has had on your career. And please do make sure to touch on any transferable skills that you found to be valuable. So Greg, if you please share first a couple of minutes for each of you as we go through. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me here tonight. It's a pleasure to be here with you all and honored to be here with this group. So again, my name is Greg Cooper. I'm a title is Conservation Forester with the Nature Conservancy. I'm based out in Asheville right now. I've been in this position for almost 2 years now. And it's an interesting position because it's a brand new position for this organization and I kind of a whole new strategic mission for the Nature Conservancy in this part of the country. So a lot of what I'm doing is strategy planning. I'm meeting with people, I'm working with other professionals to kind of develop strategies to implement more forestry practices on the ground in the Southern Blue Ridge, specifically looking in forests that are burning a lot. Like you see the smoke in my background. So we get to do a lot of prescribed fires and be out in the woods a lot and start thinking about restoration of fire to the landscape in this part of the world. So my degree was in from Duke at the Nicholas School was Master of Forestry and Master of Environmental Management. And both of those things really tie directly to what I am doing right now. Because I am obviously a forester. I'm working in forestry, working in trees and natural resource management. But I also had a pretty good skill set of sort of project management through the master's project program that the Nicholas School has, which really carries over to the types of projects and leadership and project management that I have now in developing the strategies that we're doing out here in the Southern Blue Ridge. And in addition to some of the kind of the technical skills of forestry and technical skills around GIS and geospatial mapping are things that I do every day and I'm working with every day, and sort of conveying some technical scientific data and scientific papers into easy language for folks to understand and communicate what it is that we're intending to do and why we're intending to do it. So my path was, fairly directed. I kind of knew that I wanted to work in natural resource management going into the Nicholas School. And I was super lucky to end up where I am right now out in West North Carolina in Asheville in the mountains, and a really beautiful place and really cool system to be working in. And lucky enough that I was able to apply all these skills that I've gained over time into my job right now.
Thank you, Greg. And yes, you definitely are in a beautiful place, especially this time of year. Lots of envy coming from me towards your location right now. So Hazel, would you mind sharing with us next, please?
Sure, I can go next. So I graduated from Duke in 2020 with the undergraduate BA degree in environmental sciences and policy. And then after graduation, I founded my own company, Ecolytics, which is a software-based company which helps other companies measure their emissions, gives them recommendations to decrease those impacts, and then offers a way to showcase their impact progress. So giving them some sustainability metrics and the ability to report sustainability. And so with that, I also do some sustainability consulting. I work for the Hatcher Group as well in DC, which is a smaller firm that works mostly in the public sector. So there's federal and local clients as well as nonprofits and foundations. But getting back to Duke, I had a ton of different experiences within the Nicholas School. I did a Duke Engage, Bass Connections. I wrote a thesis with the Institute for Policy Solutions. So I gained a really wide breadth of skills through Duke that allowed me to take on such an interdisciplinary role and work on ecolytics and be able to approach this big problem with a new view.
Awesome, and thank you so much for naming some of those programs that you were engaged in here. A lot of our students are engaged in some of the same, so really interested to hear more from you. Timis, if you wouldn't mind, please sharing your story next, please.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Timis Pural. I graduated from the Master in Environmental Management in 2019. I did a concentration in business and environment. My background is chemical and industrial engineer. I worked for around 7 years in the industry, like focusing on operations, manufacturing, like migrating from manufacturing, research operations, EHS, research and development. And I was always interested in finding the connection between industry and sustainability from a really practical point, not so much from the academic standpoint. And the Nicholas School of Environment offered me the perfect opportunity to transfer my skills so I could start working on corporate sustainability. That is my passion. Right now, I'm a senior sustainability consultant at John Viet Environmental, JVE. We're a boutique consultancy firm. We work in in two sectors, compliance and corporate sustainability. And in corporate sustainability, we pretty much help different companies with their strategy to incorporate sustainability in the core of the operation. We help them with carbon accounting, plastic accounting, footprinting, water and waste management, science-based target setting from the corporate standpoint and the business unit standpoint. And also we work at the product level with life cycle assessment. That was a particular skill that I learned at the Nicholas School, and that helped me to migrate this work.
Oh gosh, that's what we love to hear. The things that you learn at Duke are definitely practical once you get to the workforce. Thank you for sharing that. Sylvia, would you please share next, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Sylvia. I want to just start by saying thank you so much for being here today and wanting to learn a little bit more. I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Sciences in 2015. And since then, about 6 or so years, I've been working with clean energy technology companies based out of the San Francisco Bay Area. And I've worked for like 4 different companies, and I've had a variety of different roles within those companies, but primarily within operations and product teams. And a lot of my work has been on helping to commercialize these energy technologies and actually put them in the hands of customers, such as solar and battery storage at companies like STEM and Sunrun. And if you haven't heard of them, I would recommend looking them up. They're pretty big players in the space. And currently I'm working at a tiny startup, we're 9 people, called Terrafuse AI, which is a seed stage startup focused on essentially leveraging climate science and machine learning to develop climate risk forecasting products like wildfire risk and extreme winds risk. And I run our business operations and strategy, which really for a company of our size means anything that basically needs to happen for us to scale the business, from accounting to public relations to redoing our website. And during my time at Duke, I was involved in a variety of different things. I helped to start the undergraduate Duke Energy Club with some of my peers. I planned an independent trip to the island nation of Kiribati through Duke Engage, which was incredible, to do environmental work with an environmental education NGO there. And then I also worked at the DiGiulio Laboratory for Ecotoxicology. I would say studying environmental sciences definitely helped me a lot, just with sort of systems thinking and approaching problems through the perspective of, how all these different things interconnect. And also I was able to dabble with some data analysis during my time there, which definitely helped me with my first job, which was very heavy on analysis. And also just sort of like technical and scientific communication was something that Duke really helped me with, sort of like simplifying how we talk about these really difficult concepts. And also I think the environmental sciences degree really helps people to see right away that this is something that, you're really interested in, to the extent of pursuing a degree in it. But I will say there are people from across every degree that have, joined the sector and that are part of the industry. I'll stop there.
Wow, such a diversity of experiences. I appreciate you sharing all of that with us. Justin, would you mind sharing next?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Justin Pierce. Thanks for having me this evening. I'm currently a fishery management specialist at NOAA Fisheries in Silver Spring, Maryland. And I think I sort of chose Duke as the graduate program at the Nicholas School because I knew it had a strong track record of to NOAA and especially in fisheries management. So yeah, I went there because of the coursework and the professors and the skills that I would gain while I was at the Nick School. I think a lot of things that I learned, the nature of the Nicholas School, I think is very interdisciplinary, and so you get a lot of solid science background as well as the management aspect. So it gave me a lot of applied skills and background information that helps me be successful in finding a job after graduation. I think some of the classes, that also focus on laws and policies and governance and, conflict resolution, social science surveys. I took a great class that, helped me understand how, we survey the public and how to analyze those results. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Thank you, Justin. It's nice to know that you chose it for the reason you were able to get the results that you anticipated to get coming in. So that's always a great story. And yeah. Allison, would you mind sharing as well?
Absolutely. So hello, everyone. My name is Allison Donnelly. I am a program manager with the Clean Energy Transportation Group at Pacific Gas and Electric out here in California. If you're not familiar with PG&E, we're the electric and gas utility for about 16 million people in Northern California. And I work on a team of about 40 people that are exclusively dedicated to electrifying transportation here in NorCal. In terms of what I get to do on a daily basis, I wear like two very different hats. So I handle kind of all of our day-to-day work with a state carbon market called the Low Carbon Fuel Standard. So I handle our credit generation from electric vehicle charging, and then all of our reporting. It's a regulation through the Air Resources Board, so there's quite a bit of reporting associated with it. And then also we get to take that funding that we earn through these carbon credits and use it to create programs for our customers. So I run some of those programs. So I'm currently working on standing up a purchase incentive for pre-owned EVs, which I'm really, really excited about because, while there's a lot of incentive programs out there currently, there's very few that have targeted the used or pre-owned EV market. So there's it's kind of a big gap. And it's also really, really important in terms of kind of opening the opportunity for EVs to especially people with more limited income. So it's a really big area that we're excited to be working in. In terms of how I got here, I have a bachelor's of science in environmental science from Duke back in 2014, and a certificate in energy and the environment from Trinity and Pratt. Things that were most instrumental to me, I imagine this will come up probably a couple times throughout the conversation. I did 3 stand-back internships. So I cannot sing the praises of that program more. Really, really incredible boost to my career. And I was also part of the inaugural Basque Connections in Energy team with the Nicholas Institute, where we were looking at carbon regulations applied to oil refineries. And we presented to the EPA as part of that, and then the EPA actually cited one of our memos in their legal defense of the Clean Power Plan, which was beyond incredible and was on my bulletin board for a very long time. So a lot of really, really incredible experiences that I had, both in the classroom, but kind of in all of the very interdisciplinary things that Duke has available around.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that, Allison. And that would probably still be on my bulletin board right now. It might be on there forever, but thank you for sharing that. Definitely themes about the interdisciplinary nature of the education that you all received at Duke. I heard that throughout every one of you, everything that you shared. So we're going to jump into some specific questions right now. And this first question is for Hazel and Greg. If you could share, please, what has been the most intriguing or instrumental part of your career path that has led you to where you are right now? So, Greg, would you mind sharing first with that answer?
Sure thing. I think like the obvious thing that comes to top of mind is immediately after undergraduate, I just knew I needed to travel and do some work abroad, and I joined the Peace Corps, and so I spent 2.5 years in Paraguay, working sort of environmental education, but really doing a lot of computer classes, English classes, and doing like agriculture type work. And one of the things about that time there was, it's 2 years of life, and you want to hit the ground running, you want to go real fast, and you want to kind of solve all the problems. But the reality is I learned, and it's really applied later on as I move from career job to job and advance my career, is really need to slow down and kind of take account for what's going on, and to really understand the systems and how they're interacting, and really understanding what the actual need and the importance of what you're trying to do is. In that case, it was I just wanted to plant trees and I wanted to work in farm fields, but what the community really needed in that situation, after kind of getting to know people, was they needed someone to teach computer classes. They had these computers in classrooms and no one to teach how to use computers. So that was kind of like something that helped me to slow down and kind of be really intentional about how I think about accomplishing tasks and missions. And I think that kind of goes back to what Allison was saying about stand-back internships. Like, those were great experiences while I was at Nicholas School. I had 2 stand-back internships while I was there with a dual degree. And both of those were incredible experiences, very different from each other. But a good key strategy that I try to do in every job I've ever been in is go in with a strategy, go in with a goal you want to accomplish. It could be really big, it could be really discrete. And I remember going into each of those internships with something that I wanted to accomplish in that position, making that very clear up front that this is something I want to do while I was working with them, and working towards that and accomplishing it. And that's been incredibly helpful. It helps build a really great and compelling resume to kind of talk about these projects that you're working on and work towards completion. And that's just kind of a strategy that was kind of came out from the Peace Corps, kind of learning from this crazy complicated world that you're living in, to come up with like kind of how do you go about accomplishing really complicated tasks. And it is like very discrete, very directed objectives as you go through your career.
Awesome. Go ahead, Hazel.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that, taking the time to, figure out what you're really interested in and slowing down. That I kind of allowed myself the ability to explore a bunch of different topics. I knew that I wanted to focus within the environmental field, but like I talked about a little bit in my intro, I was involved in a Bass Connections that was related to energy, but I wrote my thesis on natural disaster recovery. And then I will also sing the praises of the Stand Back internships. I did one at Greenpeace which actually kind of led me more closer into the corporate sustainability field, which is what Ecolytics focuses on. I spent a summer going through Fortune 500 corporate sustainability reports, and that helped me see those patterns and also problems, seeing how software could help make corporate sustainability more accessible to companies, and really set me on this path to then wanting to solve the problem with Ecolytics. But also, it wasn't just that one experience that was, the only experience. That I participated in internships abroad on climate finance and international development, and that helped me see different sustainability standards. And then my Duke Engage was focused on environmental justice, and a part of the platform we're incorporating now is this, not just environmental factors, but social and governance factors. So also looking at equity as a part of the product that we're creating. So it's kind of the culmination of these experiences that were instrumental to what led me to where I am now.
Thank you. Timis, what would you say makes a recent graduate successful in your line of work and helps them to stay on that path?
I was just hearing Hazel, and I was just thinking that for consultancy, that is another trend of life, different from like a regular job. One of the key aspects is that curiosity. So that eagerness of like a researcher to learn more about like how things are happening in the world and how to translate that to a solution for your client. So for consultancy, you need to have curiosity, you need to be flexible so you can adapt between different clients, different projects, and also a lot of project management. That is a skill that you can get during your programs if you do like project focused courses, as what happened like when I took my course in the business and environment class. They give me like the opportunity to work with clients in real life, propose a project, set a timeline, goals, and just work to achieve them. And to stay on path, I think that you need to be up to date on what is happening. We have the blessing of working on sustainability sector, so helping to make this world better every day to avoid the crisis. And there are a lot of resources that are coming every day. So you need to do your research, set up to date, so you can deliver the best solution to your clients.
Thank you, Justin. Could you respond to that same question? What would you say would make a recent graduate successful in your line of work and to stay on that path?
Sure. So I think the coastal environmental management track within the MEM degree at Duke does a great job at setting you up for success in government. But government is also, federal government at least, it's also kind of its own little, I don't know, it's a very niche career, so taking classes that allow you to really be able to talk about the laws and regulations. Like if you can really describe how the Endangered Species Act works or the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the ins and outs of it, if you can somehow exhibit that on your resume, or you could talk about it extensively in an interview, I really think that sets you up for success. Also getting your foot in the door through the internships. I know we've talked about the Stand Back internship. I also did an internship my second year at Duke, and it was through another funding mechanism, a fellowship. I've been trying to find it in my emails, but I can't find the name of it. But it was for MEM students that were doing work in the United States. Anyway, it allowed me to get a funded internship to go work at NOAA, because federal government internships are kind of hard to come by sometimes, or very competitive. So I walked in with funding and was like, hey, I have X amount of dollars for the summer. Can I help you guys on a project? And I got people to take me up on it. So then really getting your foot in the door, understanding how government works, being able to talk the talk, because it's all, it's all alphabet soup with acronyms and, like I said, the jargon of rules and laws and regulations. Yeah, so I think taking courses that allow you to get that foundation of knowledge, and then, taking the next step and getting that internship and building your network and all of those things really, I think, help.
Yes, I definitely, in both of your responses, I heard themes of just being curious, staying curious, asking questions, being willing to just take some chances. Thank you so much for sharing that. So Sylvia and Allison, I know we've heard a lot about the STEM Back internship, but if you could talk specifically about what types of internships or entry-level positions do you think provide the best opportunities for learning as much as possible in your field?
Should I start?
Yes.
Okay, so regarding internships, I have to say that I did not have like a formal, what you would call like a traditional internship during my time at Duke. I was exposed to, Duke Engage and various other programs that Duke offered, which I felt really did prepare me for the field. Specifically, Duke Engage, I think, was a really important way to be exposed to the issue of climate change outside of the world of energy technology in the Bay Area, which tends to be, very dominated by corporate America and, people who basically like, all look the same way. And I think that exposure was really critical to inform basically an intersectionality to my work as much as possible, that I don't think I would have the opportunity to do that in many other points in my career. And just for context, I did Duke Engage in basically like an indigenous community in the Pacific who is very vulnerable to climate change. So that's like one example of that. I think I'll also make a plug for the energy internship program, although I don't think that was around during my time, but we actually had an intern from that program this summer that worked with our startup, and it was just phenomenal. I mean, the kinds of things that he was working on was things that I basically had to do but didn't have time for. And so it was, really things of like a lot of exposure that he was able to get. And I think regarding entry-level positions, I think there's a lot of different ways to get into the industry, but one thing that has been a really good way to get exposed to the energy world is through analyst positions. And you get to really get deep into what are all the variables that you need to have a successful clean energy development project. And I think even if you don't consider yourself a quote like a quant heavy person, I think that's a really good foundation for anything that you do within the energy sphere.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, Allison?
Yeah, so yes, stand back internships are a wonderful thing. Look at them. I think that what makes internships so helpful though is it's a way of, it's obviously a foot in the door and it's great on your resume. It's a way of kind of making little bets on yourself and seeing, what you're interested in and where things might grow. So this happened to me a lot. Like I came to Duke wanting to study climate and through my internships was introduced actually more of the energy side of the house. All of my internships were also policy oriented. So I was actually doing lobbying. Like I was in DC, I've spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill, and I did the same thing in Raleigh as well with the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association, and figured out through those experiences that if I wanted to write good policy, I needed to figure out how it was going to impact the businesses that it was written towards. And that was what pushed me actually towards working with utilities. And I was a consultant for 5 years. And I got to work with a lot of different utilities on their clean energy programs. So it was through those internships that I kind of figured out what I was interested in, what I was good at, and also where things were moving within the market. Also, I'm really sorry, they're doing construction in the apartment below me, and so if you hear hammering, promise it's not me. For entry level positions, I would actually very highly recommend consulting, kind of building off of what Sylvia said about analyst positions. So for consulting, you'll come into a role where you'll be working on different projects with different clients on different topics and probably in different locations as well. So you get kind of the opportunity to see a very broad swath of the industry, be it, remediation, whatever it ends up being, and also see how different parts of the company or different parts of the country, different companies, target these issues. So I find that hard out. One caveat to that would be I would actually stay away from management consulting. So like McKinsey, Deloitte, and companies like that, because you're not allowed to specialize as an entry-level person. So you might be doing something clean energy related, or you might be on oil and gas, or you might be on healthcare. So, if that's like, if you, like me, know that there's an area that you really want to stay within, there are hundreds of excellent consultancies from 15 people to thousands of people who focus within sustainability, environment, energy. And it's fairly easy to do Google searches on that. I may imagine there's probably lists of them now, but there's a ton of those out there, and that will probably serve you better.
Thank you for that. And thank you for also sharing about the consultant and providing some insight, because I know that is definitely a popular field for a lot of students, a lot of interest there. So thank you for providing that clarity there. So I do have another question for everyone. Before I ask it though, I want to make sure that the attendees are paying attention to the chat. As our panelists have been speaking, we've got some fantastic staff folks, Career Center colleagues, and those across campus have been dropping some links there. So students, if you haven't been paying attention to the chat, I want to make sure that you do that and grab those links. Some really phenomenal resources we want to make sure that you capture from this event. So our next question, and this is for everyone, is more about networking. I did hear a couple of you make mention of how those relationships have helped you, or how you may have used them to navigate different places. But can you talk a bit more about how your network helped you in your job search or career as you've moved through and navigated through your space? So let's start with Hazel this time. Could you answer that question first, please?
Sure. It's kind of a quick and easy answer for me, is that my co-founder is actually another Duke alum. So through that network and connection, I think a lot of the people you meet in your classes and your friends at Duke will not only serve a lifetime of friendship, but also can be great resources and possible co-founders for you.
Love that. Love that. Love that. Thank you for, yes, colleagues, classmates, peers. You never know how you might just stay connected. Justin, would you mind sharing?
Yeah, what immediately came to mind was they did, one of the student organizations at the Nicholas School did like a coffee with a professional at the time, and it happened to be somebody that worked at NOAA Fisheries office who was in town for a meeting or something. So I had coffee with the group, the small group of us, and we kept in touch. And then sure enough, a year, or maybe not even a year after I graduated, a position came available in his office. So I emailed him and I was like, hey, remember me, blah, blah, blah. And so we did a interview, like a phone, like, how can I beef up my resume? He gave me tips. And sure enough, I got an interview with that, that office. I ended up not taking the position, but I really think that was invaluable to just having like, oh, sure, before my class, I'll go sit and chat with this guy for coffee for 5 minutes. And then he ended up helping me beef up my federal resume, and I think was probably integral in me getting the interview at least. And for better or worse, there's an affectionate name at NOAA that there's a Duke Mafia. And so I do think that having the Duke name on your resume is beneficial. So yeah.
The mafia wears blue.
Yes.
Watch out for them. All right, Sylvia.
Yeah, sure. So helped me immensely, I guess, is the short answer. I had tens, if not hundreds of calls with Duke alums around the time of graduation, just helping me understand the landscape and beef up my resume as well. And everyone is extremely open and helpful. Also, my first job came from a classmate of mine who was recruiting at the time, knew I was looking in the space, and that's how I got my job. Also did freelance work for a startup that was founded by a classmate of mine. And I'll say just generally, I think a lot of people who work in this space will move around a good amount. And I think just the network within the clean energy space, even after Duke, is really powerful as well.
Thanks, Timus.
Similar to the experience of other people, I'm at my job because my network, I was kind of looking for a unicorn job. So I wanted consultancy, but also flexibility because at that point I just had my daughter. So I didn't want it to be in an office 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And I was having that discussion with one of my mentors here at the Nicholas School. And he said, like, you know what, you need to talk with this person, Kristen Rowe, who has a consultancy firm. He made a connection, and Kristen, who was a MEM alumni, we did a good match. I went through the whole process, and here I am at JB, where, by the way, we have another 4 MEMs alumni. So go Duke.
Is that a mafia? Would you call it that?
Kind of. We are working on that.
All right, Allison.
Awesome. So I have held 6 positions in the last decade, and all 6 of them I've gotten through my network. So 3 internships through Duke. My first job as a consultant, I got through an informational interview from a friend of a Duke friend. I worked at Austin Energy briefly, and I was at a networking lunch and learn, and they mentioned they had the position open. So I went and introduced myself afterwards. And then my current role at PG&E, I asked for an introduction to a Duke alum at PG&E from Stacy Peterson, who I see is in the audience. Thank you so much. That Duke alum connected me with 3 other people on her team. One of those people sent my resume and materials to the person who is now my supervisor. So I am a very, very, very big believer in the power of a network. Though I know that can be very intimidating, and often maybe we kind of think of networking as a little bit of a dirty word, like it's like schmoozing or something like that. Or maybe you believe that job hiring should be just entirely based on what you have on your resume and nothing else, and that's the way to keep it fair. But really, like, kind of comes down to it on a day-to-day basis. Like, who you work with ends up being more important than what you're working on. So you're going to spend 8 hours a day with your colleagues, which is more than your friends and possibly even your family members. So you really hope that the people you work with are kind and smart and funny and just, kind of all around good people. And that's also true from like a corporate, like enterprise perspective. Like a high performance team is a lot more valuable than a high performance individual. So networking is kind of like matchmaking in that way. And it's also a really great way of kind of organically sharing information. So like neurons or a neural network. I don't work on the East Coast anymore, but I know there's a lot of utilities that are doing really interesting things. So I'll check in with my colleagues, who are still out in New York, and figure out, find out, what they're doing right now, and what, how they can, what interesting things, they've got on their radars. And I always learn a lot from that. It can be really intimidating. I will definitely say that I am a natural introvert, though I think COVID has made me a little bit more interested in just talking and being out there. But it's taken a lot of practice and courage to go up to people at networking events, or send emails, or set up informational interviews. I'd say one thing that really helped me that maybe will help you all is that I always tried to go into those with the frame of mind of how can I help this person? So is there an introduction that I can make for them, or an article I can send, or maybe an insight from some research that I've done? Something that kind of takes the onus off of me and allows me to kind of focus on, who they are, what they need, and how I can help them.
Great advice, Allison. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I just want to highlight a note that our executive director posted in that we've started to refer to it as finding helpful humans, as opposed, because that you're right, that word networking sometimes does make folks skin crawl. But it, definitely it's just more about building your connections, meeting people that can be helpful, and you can be helpful too as well. Greg, would you mind sharing as well?
Sure. The thing that we'll start off with is like this field is quite small, and you run into people over and over and over again, in many different places in different manners, whether they just out in the street or in professional settings. It's a small field, and the network is fairly tight in the environmental field, I would say. And I've definitely leaned on both my Duke colleagues to ask questions if I have an answer if they were specializing in that, and they serve as a great resource to kind of inform me for something I'm not as up to date on. But the big networking story for me is I wouldn't be in my position right now if it weren't for my network. And it was a former stand-back manager, a supervisor of mine. I wouldn't have known that this position was even available if it weren't for her sending this information to me. And we had been in contact. And so she knew that I was starting to look for new positions from my previous role. And she sent me this and said, you have to apply for this. And I'm sure she put in some good words, but honestly, if it weren't for these kind of connections that you make along the way, it just open up some more doors and let you know about opportunities that you didn't even know you were looking for.
That's awesome. All right, and our final question is, how does your organization incorporate the value of diversity, inclusion, and equity into its mission and your day-to-day work? How are you seeing that play out? So Sylvia, I'd like for you to respond first, please.
Sure, yeah, this is a great question, and it's definitely top of mind for us. I'd say regarding our products and how we build them, we created a wildfire risk model that, as far as we know, at this scale and this accuracy, is the first of its kind to be publicly available. And for us, that's big because typically this sort of data and information is held by asset managers and insurance industry, and so making it publicly available we thought would be an important step towards democratizing this sort of information to people all across California. And actually, the product itself helps more homes to be able to be insured. That's at sort of like the product level. In terms of our everyday operations, our CEO and co-founder is a woman. Our team of 9 people come from 5 or so different countries. So it's really embedded into our hiring practices, and we really try to build a hiring pipeline that includes as much diversity as possible, and also particularly within leadership, strategic positions at the company as well.
Thank you. Justin.
Okay, I think for me it's a twofold answer. The first is like our day-to-day in the office. How are we being, how is NOAA embracing diversity inclusion? And I gotta say, I've been really impressed. I don't know how to say it. I'm a member of the LGBT community, or whatever. But so I've seen a lot of outreach and a lot of we just released an action plan for diversity and inclusion in my office, and it sets a lot of goals, like short term, what can we do, long term. I was asked, based on my background, to participate in some hiring panels, which I don't think I might have been able to do at like my seniority at the company, but they wanted a more diverse hiring panel. So I was able to participate on interviews. That was a really interesting learning experience for me. And another part of the hiring panel process was actually resume review, and we redacted this is going to hurt the Duke Mafia, but we redacted universities and names and any references to like gender or anything like that that they could, to really try and make them a more blind resume review experience. And I thought that that was a pretty remarkable step for the federal government, because, you know, I think the government has a reputation for not being very nimble or moving very quickly on things. So that was great. And then also, more recently, with the change in the administration, there's been some executive orders that have been passed on environmental justice and things like that. So NOAA Fisheries has also begun to look at like, what are our blind spots with environmental justice? How can we be more inclusive to fishing groups and fishing communities? Because, you know, we have a lot of coastline and a lot of different regions and cultures and, you know, immigrants in, like, we have a large Vietnamese fishing community in the Gulf of Mexico. And are we doing enough to really, are we translating things? Are we, you know, doing enough outreach to make sure that our rules and regulations are being, you know, equitably disseminated across all different areas of the government, or the public, I guess. So I think, you know, we probably still have a long way to go, but I'm happy to see that they've tried to make steps in the last year or so to really increase our outreach.
Yeah, I'm definitely impressed to hear that the federal government is doing that. And so that is phenomenal. Thank you for sharing that, Justin. Hazel,
Sure.
would you mind sharing, please?
Yeah, sure. Since Ecolytics is a fairly young company, this mostly comes from into product side, like I mentioned before, that we're looking to kind of have a wider range of wider definition of what sustainability means as well, that it's not just environmental factors, but also looking at different pieces of equity and looking at social and governance metrics, so that companies can also use our platform to look to see their progress in their total impact. So that incorporates equity factors as well.
Thank you so much. Tennis.
JB is being a consultant, like a boutique consultancy firm. One of the key aspects of us is that we have a lot of flexibility. We started being a remote consultancy years before COVID. We have been working always from home. And that was a key aspect for us to be able to attract a lot of talent that didn't fit on the traditional consultancy spectrum. As I mentioned before, I just had my daughter when I was looking for a job. So I was kind of like sure that I was not going to be able to fit in in a big consultancy model. So this was perfect. Pretty much, I will say that at least we have at least 4 moms on the company, and my little one is around there in the screen, being part of the conversation. And that also allows us to attract a different kind of talent, people that likes to travel, that single parents that need to be with their kids, veterans, these kind of people that doesn't fit in the traditional model, and has been really enriching for the conversation that we have in the company. Similar to what Hazel and other panelists mentioned, being in sustainability is not just the metrics, but also who are you incorporating in the conversations for the companies? Like, who voices should be part of the conversation at the table, and transparency on what are we showing to our stakeholders so they can take decisions based on that information.
Thank you for that. Allison.
So I'd start by saying, so PG&E is by far the most diverse company that I've ever worked for. And that's from the team that I work on, like all the way up to the C-suite level. And so it's a gigantic company. There's 23,000 employees, all within Northern California. So there's obviously a ton of different things kind of within and outside of the company that are being worked on. So I'm just going to focus on one that I think has been really eye-opening to me. Mid last year, we had a team that got stood up within the company whose sole job it is to focus on diversity and inclusion within PG&E, so spurring those conversations. And one of the things they do on a biweekly basis is kind of like a fireside chat style lunch and learn with members of our senior leadership. So vice presidents all the way up to like the CEO of the company. And if you think of a company of 23,000 people, one of the things that you often run into is very much a sense of everything being anonymous. And that's especially true for, VPs who are 5 levels above me, who maybe I've heard their name, but I have no idea what on earth they do. So these conversations are really meant to kind of draw back the curtain and delve into how and where they grew up and what got them interested in their various topics, and like what are the twists and turns that their careers have taken. So as part of those conversations, I've learned that one of the members of our C-suite was homeless as a child. We have someone who's an active member of the Coast Guard who was involved in the Deepwater Horizon spill and the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. We have someone who grew up in a tricultural and trilingual household. We have folks who are immigrants or the children of immigrants and whose parents don't speak any English. One of our VPs was stationed on the USS Cole when it was bombed by Al-Qaeda. So just a really huge diversity of experiences that are being brought to bear at this company. And it's been really incredible to listen to these stories and their struggles of these people who are now in positions of power and are bringing new perspectives to, a company that is really needed it, and all of that human empathy. And it's made me really hopeful about the future of this company and this team.
Thank you for that, Allison. And Greg.
Yeah. So yeah, TNC is a huge organization, international organization, and we have just tons of folks from all over the world. And I think one of the ways I've most directly experienced their initiatives around diversity and inclusion is some of these town halls that we've had over the past few years here, where they'll have kind of these kind of mixed town halls with people from all over the place, and they just sort of foster this community of open communication. And so we'll be like broken out into kind of these virtual groups, and we'll have really great heart-to-hearts just to learn about each other and learning about people's backgrounds. And I think it just creates a huge level of compassion and empathy within our community. And obviously people that we don't work with on a day-to-day basis, but we get to know some from different country or different place in the States or a whole different program of work. And I think that's a big strength that TNC has is just kind of being able to bridge a lot of people from across the country, across the world together in these kind of conversations that they have, and really being open to the employees to be able to communicate with each other and on up the chain as well.
Thank you so much, you all, for sharing how your companies are valuing DE&I initiatives. I know that we're coming close to time. We do probably have time to get to one, maybe 2 questions. Before we do that, I do want to make mention of an event that is happening tomorrow before folks depart. It is the Nick Eco Exploring Career Options. It's a networking event. It's from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can, it is a virtual event. You can register on Handshake. That's required. So I want to make sure the registration is required. So I want to make sure everyone is aware of that. And we do have a few questions in the chat, and I'm just going to go in the order that I see them in. And the first one that I see is specifically for Greg, with a request to share more about your transition of returning from the Peace Corps to the job that you have today.
Yeah, so that that transition is rough, real rough, because you're just going from a whole different lifestyle back to American culture. And I floundered for a while. I think there was a good, honestly, it was 6 months in there where I had no idea what I wanted to do. But again, reached out to a network that I had in place from undergrad to kind of figure out what should my next steps be. I was working at a 9-to-5 retail job immediately afterwards because it's something I knew in a place that I knew, and then eventually ended up working for a local land trust and doing very interesting work with them. But what so happened there was my supervisor in that position, another coworker, were both Nicholas School alums. and they're like, Greg, you have to, take a look at this program. I think it's gonna be a really good fit for you. And that was, the next step for me at that point was applying for that program. And I think from there, that through line kind of follows through those stand back internships, where I had one stand back internship with the Nation Conservancy, and I learned about the values of the organization and the kinds of work that this organization is doing, and really, ended up back here again and a great job in a great place.
Duke Mafia is everywhere, huh? All right. Okay. The next question, let me see if I can condense this a little bit. I'm curious about people's experience in getting jobs without having a master's degree before entering grad school. Can anyone speak to that experience? Just getting a job with a bachelor's in the space that you are in now. What does that look like?
I can speak that a little bit. I had the experience coming out of senior year. My job hunt was 9+ months, and I got my job offer literally the day before graduation, and packed the car and drove to New York City and started the next week. So it was a pretty wild experience, and that was largely because I went through a bunch of interviews, both informational and full ones, and was told that I should come back when I had a master's degree. And which I thought was not particularly nice or helpful because I took a lot of master's classes actually as an undergraduate. To get around that, I think bolster your resume in other places. So internships were really, really valuable. And a lot of the internship, like the stand back internships, you are competing with master's students there as well. So you get really good at answering the question, why should we hire you over someone who has more experience? And I've been like, that question comes up a lot. And I'm a-okay answering that because I now have all of that experience, and I can say, with a pretty strong degree of confidence that I have really incredible things that I can bring to bear in this company. And yes, I am younger, but that means that you, company, have more of an opportunity to shape my experience.
Thank you so much, Allison. And we are at time. I do want to be respectful of the time of all of our panelists and even those of you who attended this evening's event. So thank you so very much. I hope that the students who participated, were able to get something helpful from this today. Please do make sure to check out the Nick Eco event tomorrow, and also continue to support Duke Career Center events. So thank you everyone for joining today, and we hope to see you again. And panelists, alums, thank you.